Hi, my name is Ifat Afek. I'm the PTL of Vitrage. I'm going to present the project update session. So I will talk about what we did in the Stein release and what are our plans moving forward. I'll start with a brief explanation about Vitrage, just in case not all of you are familiar with it. So Vitrage is the root cause analysis service of OpenStack. Root cause analysis, I think it's quite straightforward. Something doesn't work well in the system, like you have a network failure, and it affects a lot of resources. You get a lot of alarms from your monitors, and Vitrage can help you pinpoint the problem. Out of all of these alarms, what you should handle first that will solve most of the problems. On the other way around, Vitrage also knows how to identify the affected resources. So again, in case of a network failure, Vitrage will tell you that the host is affected, the instance is affected, some applications. And Vitrage is doing it using a unique knowledge of the system topology. Vitrage maintains a topology graph with all the entities in the system. We support upstream the OpenStack components like Nova, Cinder, Neutron, and Heat. And we put all the resources in a graph with the relations between them. And this helps Vitrage decide about the affected resources and about the root cause. Regarding alarms, Vitrage is not a monitor. It connects to external monitors. We support Zabbix, Nagios, CollectD, and Prometheus. We are going to support Monasca in Train. It's almost finished, the implementation. And anyone is very welcome to add new data sources, new topology, and new monitoring. So I'll explain about what we did in Stein. I did not mention the Vitrage templates. The Vitrage templates are the place where you define the rules of when to mark two alarms as one causing the other, when to raise additional alarms on affected resources, what are the affected resources. We have a language for determining these conditions and actions. And we got some comments in the past that the language is a bit too verbose. So we wrote a new version of the Vitrage template language. Obviously, we support the previous version as well. The new language is twice shorter, and it's much more intuitive. We just removed some parts that we thought were not necessary. So everyone is welcome to use it. Another improvement that we did around the templates is that we now support template with parameters. We identified that in many cases, our templates just look almost the same. So if there is a problem on the host, the instances are affected. If there is a CPU problem on the host, you would like to modify the state of the host to suboptimal, modify the state of the instance to suboptimal, raise an alarm on the instance. If there is a memory problem on the host, you do exactly the same. Only the names of the alarms are different. So we now have an option to write a template and reuse it with different parameters. When you created the template, you pass the parameters. Inside the template, you have a definition of what are the parameters that are being used, and you need some have default values, some are mandatory. You need to just pass the parameters and create the template. It's very easy to reuse the templates. And this is the example. So on the left part, you have the template with parameters. You see the parameters sections here on the left. This defines which parameters exist in the templates. Some have default values, some you must supply. And using the parameter, using a getParam syntax. And when you create a template, this is the syntax of creating a template, ---- params, and the values of the parameters. And the created template, which is inserted into the database, already has the actual parameters that you put into it. We always like to add new integrations to Vitrage because the more information Vitrage has, the better insights it can provide. We had a contribution of a Trove data source. Trove is a database as a service as part of OpenStack. So now it is a data source of Vitrage. We wrote a notifier for Zakar. So if you are using Zakar, you will be able to get notifications about Vitrage alarms. And we have, in Rocky actually, we have a Prometheus data source, but we noticed that it has to be enhanced. We improved the way to configure it. So when you get an alarm from Prometheus, the challenging part is to identify which resource in Vitrage the alarm should be raised on. And we had a more flexible configuration option to let you identify this resource, so the alarm will be connected to the right resource in Vitrage. And also in Rocky, the integration with Prometheus was done also only using notifications from Prometheus to Vitrage. This is the preferred way, but now that Prometheus also supports an API to query the current state, then we added this support to Vitrage as well. So periodically, Vitrage queries Prometheus for the current state and verifies that everything is up to date. We've made a lot of enhancements around the API. We added a new API to query the list of services inside Vitrage. It could be useful. The resource list API, I mean, we had from the first version the Vitrage topology show, but this API returns a graph of all the resources and alarms in Vitrage. It's not very usable, only if you have a very minimal graph. And we had an API for querying the list of resources. We improved it by supporting filtering on the API. You can query resources by type, by status, by specific properties. We added a new API for get resource count. So you are able to see how many resources of every type you have. And the goal was, one, to help you get less resources and the exact resources you are interested in. And by doing this, we also reduce the memory consumption, the time it takes to return the resources, so you don't get data that you don't really need. There is always the question that keeps popping, that whether we want a complex query language. For example, give me all the instances that are connected to a host, that there is an alarm on this host. Of course, there are standard or existing query languages. We might want to support one of them, but we never got to actually research it. Another small issue is that you can now create a template by a string. Instead of, until now, you had to create a template with a file, which was a bit restricting. Now you can just pass a string. It's written YAML string, but actually you need to pass a JSON string. And this can help us in the future write a template editor in the UI, for example, for Vitrage. It helps using Vitrage inside HIT. So this was also added. And last thing, we have the topology show and RCA show. Both APIs return a graph. So until Stein, it was returning just a JSON, which has a graph representation. Now we support two standard formats, the dot and the GraphML. And now you can actually call Vitrage topology show, create a dot format, and use this file inside other graphical tools that know how to show it. There are tools that can show graphs very nice, in a nice visual way, and you can create the graph and see it. Some other changes we've made, I think since Rocky, we are continuously improving the Vitrage performance. We've made significant improvements. We now know that the Vitrage graph works well with over 150,000 entities. And we continue to improve it every version. So also in Stein, we reduce the memory consumption and the processing time. We had a Vitrage collector service that was added a few versions ago, and we decided it was an overhead. The purpose of the Vitrage collector was to separate the collecting the information from the data sources from the Vitrage graph, which was responsible for the evaluating and processing the events, but having to send all the events from the collector to a graph to a different process was a huge overhead, so we actually merged them together. We support Nova version notifications. This is really a minor issue. And we did a refactoring of the Vitrage Tempest plugin. So the Vitrage Tempest plugin was written when Vitrage started. It was written not according to the standards. And as time passed, I mean, we continued to copy-paste the same solution over and over again. And one of the main problems with this Tempest plugin was that it was directly using Vitrage code. And now that they are separated, they are not in the same repository, we had to import Vitrage. And of course, the Tempest should simulate user actions. It's not supposed to be familiar with the backend at all. So now we managed to separate it from the Vitrage backend. Around the UI, we've made some changes. We have something, again, in the Vitrage dashboard, we had some static vendor scripts, which was something we were not supposed to do. We are trying to remove them step by step. And we did a POC of using a React plugin inside Horizon. It was demonstrated in the marketplace 2 days ago. It looks like this. It's a POC. It's not, I think that part of it is really connected to Vitrage. Part is just looking good for a demo. But we managed to have this working inside of Horizon, which looks amazing. Also thanks to Ivan, who is sitting here and listening. Now it's possible to improve. I mean, the motivation was that the Vitrage UI requires improvement. And if we are going to improve it, let's write something that looks really good. OK, so this was around Stein, and now let's continue to train. Something that I was just presenting like in the previous session, there is a code under code review. It's about to enter train, that you will be possible to use Vitrage inside a hit template. So when you write a hit template, you can configure Vitrage template inside of it. Hit will create the Vitrage template. And it's useful for self-healing. So you deploy a hit stack. You would like to control the self-healing. You can say, if there is a specific alarm on my instance, I would like to execute a Mistral healing workflow. And the connection from the alarm to Mistral is managed by Vitrage. Not only the connection from the alarm to Mistral, because Vitrage can be the one to actually raise the alarm. Because there could be a network failure, and Vitrage understands that the network failure affects the instance. So Vitrage raises an alarm on an instance and executes the Mistral workflow. And you can configure all of it from Hit. And I think that the most important thing is that you will have one example that is working, and you will be able to very easily duplicate it to other hit stacks. So you don't really need to be a Vitrage expert. If you want the very basic self-healing solution, you will be able to use it like at minimal effort. If you want something more complex, you will need to learn Vitrage template language in details. This is the example. On the left part, you see the hit template, where you actually define a Vitrage template resource. As I said, the code is written and it's working, but it's under code review, so it did not enter Stein. You cannot see it yet in Git or in the code. And here you create the template and pass parameters to the existing Vitrage template with parameters. And the template, you will have this example ready in the hit templates repository. So it will be very easy to reuse it. Again, data sources and integrations. We have a Monasca data source, which is almost done. It's under code review, but we have like minimal fixes that should be done. And this is the basic implementation. The problem with the basic implementation is that it requires 2 specific dimensions to be defined in Monasca in order for Vitrage to identify the relevant resource. So if you have Monasca alarm with dimensions resource type and resource ID, the alarm will be added to Vitrage and connected to the right resource. But obviously, we would like Vitrage to be able to work with any Monasca installation. We don't want to force Monasca to add dimensions. And we currently are under the process of designing how to configure this relation between Monasca and Vitrage. This should be an additional effort, not too big. Hopefully, it will be done in train. We are going to discuss it in the PTG tomorrow, under the self-healing PTG tomorrow afternoon. We have a new code under code review of a capacitor data source by InfluxDB. I'm not really familiar with it, but I know it's another monitor. And of course, we would like to add as many monitors to Vitrage as possible. Vitrage availability. This is an issue that keeps coming. It was very improved in Rocky, I think. So currently, we have several processors for Vitrage. Vitrage API and Vitrage Notifier can run highly available. You can have several processors running on different controllers, for example. And if Vitrage sends a notification, it really doesn't matter which Vitrage Notifier handles it. Regarding the Vitrage graph service, it's much more complicated, because Vitrage graph is an in-memory graph database by NetworkX. Why is it in-memory? Because we tested using a persistent graph database, and it really affected the performance. When we are using the Vitrage evaluator, we are running subgraph matching algorithm, and running it against the persistent graph database it doesn't make sense to do it. So we are using in-memory graph database. If someone would like an active-active Vitrage graph, the graphs need to keep updating one another somehow, or even an active-passive. It's very complicated. Right now, we don't have this solution, so the graph is not highly available. But we have a fast failover. So when the graph goes down and is restarted, we know that for a very large entity graph, it's restarted in less than 5 seconds, because we keep backups of the graph all the time. So the backups are stored to the database, to a relational database, but they are used only for restoring upon failure. And there is the cross-project work. We have Adam here from the self-healing SIG. So a SIG is a special interest group, and we have one for self-healing, where we try to find solutions for self-healing that combine different projects from OpenStack. And Vitrage participates in some of these solutions. I mean, the purpose is to document use cases and also find solutions. We have an integration of Vitrage and Congress, which was already implemented in Rocky, but I decided to list it here anyway. And Vitrage and HIT and Vitrage and Monasca, I mentioned it already. That's it. I think also we are almost out of time. We have the contact information. We will be happy to hear your ideas and thoughts and comments. And if you have questions now, then maybe we'll have time. Not sure. Maybe 2 minutes for questions if you have any.
Not really a question, but I would like to mention that we fixed not only performance issue, but CPU usage issue too. So it consumes less CPU now.
Yeah. Yeah. Ilan did a lot of work around these areas. Yeah. OK, thank you very much.